Here is my audience. Trying to. All right. I think that was 6.
Thank you, everybody, for listening today. This is my informative speech for my human communications class with Park University. I like to begin. This speech is about the Defense of Marriages Act as well as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I like to begin with a story. Once upon a time, there were 2 women who were madly in love with one another. They loved each other so much, in fact, that they had to get married secretly, so no one would know except their closest family and friends. The 2 women lived this way in secret, and because they were both in their country's military, they fought for their country, even though it didn't allow them to be together publicly. Both of them lived double lives, only comforted by the fact that they could come home to the person they loved every night. One day, even though the country wouldn't acknowledge that they were really truly married, their generals said, "Be free to love in public, and we will still grant you security. We, your leaders, will not pass judgment on you." The women were elated, and every day as they came into their camp, they no longer had to release each other's hands. They no longer had to hide. They both hoped that with their newfound acceptance, that maybe one day their country that they fought and defended would accept them as they were, 2 people in love. That in itself would be a very happy ending. The end. Don't Ask, Don't Tell, DADT, was imparted in 1993 by President Bill Clinton. Originally, it was meant to end the ban on homosexuals in the military. But what it did was it created an environment where a person could fight and die for their country, but they couldn't be open about their sexuality. Between fiscal year 93 and 2004, $3,770,279 was the amount that the government spent separating homosexuals. That money went everywhere from separation costs to training to recruiting to find people to fill those spots for the people that they did separate. Now, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed September 20th of 2011. What that did was it allowed service members who were homosexuals to serve openly in the military. Now, the Defense of Marriages Act was also signed by President Bill Clinton in 1996, and what that did was federally recognized only the marriage between one man and one woman as being a real marriage, which means that federally, if, let's say, I got married to my wife in New York, where it is allowed state to be married, and we went to someplace like New Jersey, where it was not recognized, it would federally be not allowed. It wouldn't be considered a real true marriage, and state benefits would not be given. Now, there was a situation, a woman named Edith Spire. She was married for 40 years to the same person. 40 years of paying bills together, of living together, doing laundry, all the things that are a part of a marriage for 40 years. One day her spouse died. She was in such shock after that death that she had a heart attack and she went to the hospital. Now, while she was in the hospital, the federal government came to her and said that the inheritance that her wife had left her, they were going to tax her additionally $363,000 additional inheritance tax because she was married to a woman, and that person, even though they had spent 40 years together, was nothing more than a friend after 40 years of marriage. Not only was that inheritance tax something that homosexual couples do not get the way that heterosexual couples get, but also family medical leave. So in a situation where, let's say my wife were to get hurt, were she a civilian, were we civilians, I would not be able to take leave in order to take care of her. Now, back to Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Ask, Don't Tell, as I said, was repealed September 20th of 2011. The Secretary of Defense, Leon Pineda, before he left his position, he put out an instruction that said that the military was going to be offering some benefits back to military members, to homosexual military members, because of the repeal. Now, what that included was ID cards. After the declaration of domestic partnership, the spouses of a homosexual military member would be allowed to have an ID card, as well as their non-dependent children. So, an example of that, were my wife a civilian, she would be allowed to have an ID card after we signed a declaration. So would her child. Also included with that are commissary and exchange privileges, as well as access to the child development centers on base. One of the additional perks of this would be dual military co-location. As in myself being a military member, my wife being a military member, we would be able to be co-located, such as a heterosexual marriage couple would be allowed to. But until DoMA, the Defense of Marriages Act, is fully overturned, there are such things that we will not be able to get, such as health care. In a heterosexual marriage, the spouse of a service member does get free health care through the government. They also get BAH, Basic Military Housing Allowance, for their dependents, which is something that a same-sex marriage does not get and will not get at this time. PCS travel and allowances is another benefit that same-sex marriage couples do not get and will not be getting at this time. I would like to quote an Associate Justice during the Supreme Court hearings. For the federal government to then come in and say no joint return, no medical deductions, no marital deductions, no Social Security benefits, your spouse is sick but you can't get leave, one might ask what kind of marriage that is. With the repeal of DoMA, that would allow Social Security benefits, it would allow inheritance benefits, and hospital visitation rights. So if a same-sex spouse was sent to the hospital and they were on life support, for example, their spouse would have no say over what was to happen. That would be left to the parents. In conclusion, the repeal would allow marriage equality, that would allow for segregation to not be an issue based on sexual orientation, much like women were segregated